This week on Maker Update, Bob's bobblehead, machine learning for quirky droids, a laptop with a side of soldering iron, and an easy recipe for haunted mirrors. Hey, I'm Donald Bell, and this is Maker Update, the show where we update you on cool things makers are making. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you're having a good one, and I've got a fun show for you. Let's get started with the project of the week. On his channel, Bob Claggett from I Like to Make Stuff has a great and funny video on how he made this giant wearable bobblehead style Optimus Prime head. There are two things I love about this. First, as a fan of approachable projects with a high impact and a big payoff, this really hits the target. I mean, it's essentially all cardboard and hot glue, and that's by design, since it's necessary to keep the whole thing as lightweight as possible. Yes, you'll need to do a little work to seal it and paint it and find a way to mount it to your head, but for the most part, there's nothing here that you couldn't accomplish with a box cutter, a straight edge, and some scrap cardboard. But the second thing I love about this project is that we get to go along for the ride as Bob tries something new. In this case, PlanKuter, which is a style of paper craft that uses tabs and folds to create complex shapes. For this project, Bob buys an existing PlanKuter design of the Optimus Prime head off Etsy and scales it up around 200%. After cutting, folding, and slotting everything into place, he adds a few extras, like hiding the corrugation with strips of styrene and a 3D printed panel for the forehead, but really, you could pull this off without those touches. He also admits at the end that doing something like this using foam core could save you some of the hassle of hiding the open edges. One thing you will need, though, is some way to comfortably mount this to your head. In this case, Bob has some success adapting a replacement headband for a welding helmet. It may not hold up to repeated use, and the cardboard will certainly degrade over time, but it's an inspiring blueprint for a unique costume concept that you could knock out in a weekend. Now for some news. At a robotics conference last Wednesday, a Disney research team presented a brand new, yet-to-be-named robotic character. The robot is remote controlled and made from a mix of off-the-shelf and 3D printed components. Putting aside how adorable it is, the aspect of the robot that seems to be getting the most attention from researchers is the way it walks. Bipedal balancing robots like this aren't anything new, and the hardware is relatively common. So how did the Disney team create an automated style of walking that has so much personality without sacrificing stability? The answer is machine learning. The team, made up of both engineers and animators, trained the robot's movement on a mix of practical and highly expressive examples. By baking these characteristics into the system, not only do all of the robot's movements conform to a certain physical personality, but that personality becomes independent of the hardware. You could give this guy 2 more legs and some arms, and in a relatively short time see a robot that you recognize as moving in the same style. It's super exciting, and it doesn't hurt that it's super cute too. More projects. On Hackaday, I saw this entry into the Cyberdeck contest by Protolino Official. It's called the PlanKuter, and I feel like this should be standard issue to all DigiKey employees. The design is optimized for breadboarding and hardware hacking and prototyping. Underneath the keyboard is a drawer that slides out that initially looks like a wrist rest. Open it up, and there's a selection of jumper wires and components. Above the keyboard, you get a platform for tinkering and some exposed GPIO for the Arduino section of the Latte Panda board the computer runs on. But the coolest trick is the USB-powered soldering iron that's tucked away on the side of the computer. The same power supply powering the computer can be used to run your soldering iron too. Such a cool idea. And on his YouTube channel, Scare Dad shows how he created this haunted mirror using a donated TV, an old frame, and some 2A mirror glass film. If you're like me and you've got an old curb-scored TV in the garage waiting for a project, this could be a fun one to slap together for Halloween. Now for some tips and tools. From Hendrik, we've got a great video demonstrating 3 methods of creating a metallic finish on 3D printed parts. From a minimal effort using spray paint to a more involved airbrush technique, all the way up to a complicated process of electroplating, you can see what's possible. For most of us, especially for a Halloween accessory people will only see in the dark, a spray paint technique with a little TLC is just fine. But if you're really going all out for something beautiful to keep in your collection, it's crazy to see how electroplating can deliver results like this. Wow. And over on Tindy, I thought this was cool. It's called the USB-C Crowbar by Indrora. It's basically a drop-in replacement for older generations of USB sockets. Whether you want to upgrade an old project or hack some older consumer hardware to use USB-C, this looks like an elegant way to go instead of some specialty cable or string of dongles. For this week's DigiKey Spotlight, check out the latest episode of The Bite-Sized Engineer. He's taking a look at how to build your own solder reflow oven. Has your journey into DIY electronics brought you to the point where you're designing your own printed circuit boards for use with surface mount components? Well then, you're probably ready for a solder reflow oven. Zach shows how he created his own solution using a basic toaster oven, an Arduino, a relay, and a thermocouple to read the oven temperature. You can find a link to his video and his GitHub repo down in the description. Alright, and that does it for this week's show. Be sure to subscribe, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment if you like. Big thanks to DigiKey Electronics for making this show possible, and thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.